The old piano sat in the corner of their tiny apartment, its wooden surface worn smooth from years of use. The keys were slightly yellowed and a few of them stuck when pressed too hard, but to 17-year-old Maya, it was the most beautiful instrument in the world. She had been blind since the day she was born. The doctors told her mother there was nothing they could do. No surgery, no treatment could give Maya the gift of sight, but what Maya couldn't see with her eyes she experienced through sound. And music became her way of understanding everything around her. Every afternoon after school, Maya would sit at that piano for hours. Her fingers moved across the keys with a confidence that seemed almost impossible for someone who had never seen the instrument. She didn't need to look at sheet music or watch her hands. The music lived inside her, and all she had to do was let it flow out through her fingertips. Her mother worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment and to pay for Maya's piano lessons. She cleaned offices early in the morning before most people woke up, and then worked at a grocery store until late evening. Money was always tight, but she never once complained. Watching her daughter play the piano, seeing the pure joy on Maya's face, made every long hour worth it. Maya's piano teacher, an older woman named Mrs. Roberts, had been teaching music for over 40 years. She had worked with hundreds of students, many of them talented, but Maya was different. Mrs. Roberts saw something special in the way Maya connected with music. It wasn't just technical skill. It was deeper than that. Maya seemed to feel every note, every pause, every emotion the composer had poured into the piece. One Tuesday afternoon, Mrs. Roberts arrived at their apartment with news that made Maya's heart race. "I want you to audition for the National Youth Piano Competition," Mrs. Roberts said, her voice filled with excitement. Maya's hands froze on the piano keys. "The national competition? Mrs. Roberts, I don't know if I can do that. Why not? You're as talented as any student I've ever taught. More talented than most, if I'm being honest." Maya's mother, who had just come home from her morning shift, looked worried. "Isn't that competition very expensive? We barely manage the lesson fees as it is." Mrs. Roberts smiled warmly. "There's no entry fee for the audition round, and if Maya makes it through, there are scholarships available. This could open so many doors for her. Real opportunities to study music at the best schools." Maya felt a knot forming in her stomach. She had never performed in front of a large audience before. The thought of standing on a big stage with hundreds of people watching her made her hands shake. "I've only ever played here, in our apartment, and sometimes at your studio," Maya said quietly. "What if I mess up? What if people think I'm just some blind girl trying to get attention?" Her mother sat down beside her on the piano bench and took her hand. "You've never let being blind stop you from doing anything you wanted to do. Remember when you learned to ride a bike? Everyone said it was impossible, but you did it anyway." Maya smiled at the memory. She had fallen so many times, covered herself in bruises and scrapes, but she kept trying until she could ride down their street without any help. "This is different, Mom. This competition is serious. The best young pianists from all over the country compete. They've probably been training their whole lives with expensive teachers and perfect pianos." Mrs. Roberts pulled a chair closer. "Maya, listen to me. I've been teaching piano longer than you've been alive. I know talent when I hear it. Yes, you'll be competing against students who can see the music, who can read complicated scores, but you have something they don't. You hear music differently. You feel it in a way most people never will. But what if I'm not good enough? Then you'll have tried. And that's better than spending the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you had just been brave enough to take the chance." Maya sat in silence for a long moment. Her fingers absently traced the familiar pattern of keys. This piano had been her safe place, her escape from a world that often didn't understand her. But maybe it was time to show that world what she could do. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll audition." Her mother hugged her tight, and Mrs. Roberts beamed with pride. Over the next 6 weeks, Maya practiced harder than she ever had before. She chose to perform Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most challenging pieces in classical music. Mrs. Roberts had suggested something easier, something safer. But Maya wanted to prove something, not just to the judges, but to herself. Every day after school, she would practice until her fingers ached. She memorized every note, every dynamic change, every subtle emotion in the piece. Her mother would sit in their small kitchen, listening to the same music over and over again, never complaining about the repetition. Some nights, Maya would wake up from dreams where she was on stage and everything went wrong. She would forget the notes or trip walking to the piano, or the audience would laugh at her. Those nightmares left her shaking and doubting herself. But then she would sit at her piano in the morning light, place her fingers on the keys, and remember why she loved music so much. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It wasn't about winning competitions. It was about the way music made her feel complete, the way it gave voice to emotions she couldn't express any other way. The day before the competition, Mrs. Roberts came over one last time to hear Maya play the piece through. When Maya finished, there was silence in the room. For a moment, Maya worried that something had gone wrong. Then she heard a soft sniffling sound. "Mrs. Roberts, are you crying?" The older woman laughed through her tears. "That was beautiful, Maya, truly beautiful. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know how proud I am of you, not because you're blind and learned to play piano, but because you're a genuine artist. You have a gift, and it's been an honor to teach you." That night, Maya barely slept. She kept running through the piece in her mind, her fingers twitching slightly as she imagined each passage. Her mother checked on her several times, bringing warm milk and gentle reassurances. Tomorrow, Maya would walk onto a stage at the Metropolitan Concert Hall. Tomorrow, she would sit at a piano in front of hundreds of people. Tomorrow, she would compete against the best young pianists in the country. And tomorrow, she would meet a man whose harsh words would nearly break her spirit. But tomorrow, she would also discover just how strong she really was. For now, in the quiet darkness of her room, Maya whispered a small prayer. Not for victory, but for courage. The courage to show the world that being blind had never stopped her from seeing the beauty in music. The Metropolitan Concert Hall was nothing like Maya had imagined. Well, she couldn't actually see it, but she could feel its size the moment she walked through the doors. The ceiling seemed impossibly high, and every small sound echoed in a way that told her this space was massive. Her mother held her arm gently as they made their way through the lobby. Maya could hear dozens of conversations happening at once, the nervous chatter of other competitors and their families. She heard snippets of people discussing finger techniques and debating which pieces were most impressive. Some voices sounded confident, almost cocky. Others trembled with the same nervousness she felt. Mrs. Roberts met them near the entrance to the backstage area. "How are you feeling?" she asked Maya. "Terrified," Maya admitted with a small laugh. "My hands won't stop shaking. That's completely normal. Even professional musicians get nervous. The key is to use that energy when you play, not let it paralyze you." A volunteer directed them to the waiting area backstage. Maya counted her steps carefully, memorizing the path. If she needed to walk anywhere alone, she wanted to feel confident about it. Her white cane tapped softly against the polished floor. The backstage area was crowded with young pianists, all warming up in their minds or quietly humming scales. Maya found a chair and sat down, trying to calm her racing heart. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand. "I need to use the restroom," her mother said after a few minutes. "Will you be okay here for a moment?" "I'll be fine, Mom. Mrs. Roberts is right here." But Mrs. Roberts had stepped away to check the performance schedule, leaving Maya alone in her chair. She didn't mind. Sometimes the quiet was better than awkward conversations with strangers who didn't know what to say to a blind person. That's when she heard the voice. It was a man's voice, deep and commanding, with an accent that sounded European, maybe French or Belgian. The voice carried authority, the kind of tone that expected to be listened to. "I see we have a blind contestant this year," the man said. He wasn't trying to whisper. He clearly didn't care who heard him. Maya's body went rigid. She knew somehow that he was talking about her. Another voice, a woman's, responded. "Yes, her name is Maya. Her teacher says she's quite talented." The man made a sound that was almost a laugh, but not quite. It was dismissive, cold. How charitable of the organizers. Though I question whether this is the appropriate venue for such inspirational stories. Maya felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to stand up, to walk away, but her legs wouldn't move. "This is a serious competition," the man continued. "It requires sight reading of complex musical scores, stage presence, artistic interpretation that goes beyond simple memorization. I've judged competitions around the world, and I've seen these cases before. Everyone applauds their courage, yes, but let's not pretend that disability doesn't limit capability." The woman tried to interrupt. "But surely, the piano requires eyes as much as it requires hands," he said firmly. "Visual connection with the instrument. Awareness of the audience, the ability to read dynamics and notation in real time. These blind musicians, they memorize a piece or two, play it mechanically, and people call it inspiring. But inspiration isn't artistry. They'll never reach true mastery. It's simply not possible. Maya's hands were clenched so tight her fingernails dug into her palms. She felt hot tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. The man's voice moved farther away as he walked with the other judges, but his words stayed behind, echoing in Maya's head louder than any music. Her mother returned a moment later and immediately noticed something was wrong. "Maya, sweetheart, what happened? You look upset." Maya shook her head, not trusting her voice. Mrs. Roberts came back with a program. "You're performing in about 20 minutes. How are you?" "Oh no, what's wrong?" "She heard something," her mother said quietly. Maya finally found her voice, though it came out smaller than she wanted. "One of the judges was talking about me. He said blind people can't really master piano. He said I'm just here as some kind of inspirational story, but I'll never be a real artist." Mrs. Roberts's voice turned sharp with anger. "Who said that?" "I don't know. A man with an accent. European, I think." "That must be Vincent Laurent," Mrs. Roberts said, her tone bitter. "He's one of the head judges. Famous concert pianist, and apparently a complete snob." Maya's mother looked ready to march over and confront the man, but Maya grabbed her hand. "Don't, Mom, it'll just make things worse. They'll think I can't handle criticism." "That wasn't criticism," her mother said fiercely. "That was cruelty. He doesn't know you. He doesn't know how hard you've worked." "Maybe he's right, though," Maya said softly. "Maybe I'm fooling myself. Maybe I'll never be as good as someone who can see the music." Mrs. Roberts knelt down in front of Maya's chair. "Now you listen to me. That man is a fool. Yes, he's famous. Yes, he's technically brilliant. But he's forgotten something important. Music isn't just about technical perfection. It's about emotion. It's about connection. It's about making people feel something real. And you, Maya, you do that better than any student I've ever taught. But what if I go out there and prove him right? What if I mess up and everyone thinks he was correct about me?" Her mother squeezed her hand. "Baby, you have a choice right now. You can let his words defeat you before you even play a single note. Or you can go out there and show him exactly what a blind pianist can do. Show him what he's too blind to see." Maya sat in silence, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to pack up and go home, to hide away from the judgment and the doubt. But another part of her, the part that had learned to ride a bike despite everyone saying it was impossible, the part that had taught herself to navigate her entire neighborhood without help, that part was getting angry. She had spent her entire life dealing with people who underestimated her. Teachers who didn't think she could handle regular classes. Kids who didn't invite her to parties because they assumed she couldn't participate. Store clerks who talked to her mother instead of directly to her, as if being blind also made her unable to speak. And now this judge, this famous pianist who had never heard her play a single note, had already decided she wasn't capable of real artistry. Maya stood up from her chair, her jaw set with determination. "I'm going to play," she said quietly, "and I'm not going to play it safe. I'm going to play the way I feel it, the way I hear it in my heart. If that's not good enough for him, then that's his problem, not mine." Mrs. Roberts smiled. "That's my girl." A volunteer called Maya's name from across the room. It was time. As Maya walked toward the stage entrance, counting her steps carefully, she could hear her mother and Mrs. Roberts following behind her. Her white cane tapped out a steady rhythm against the floor. Somewhere in the judging area, Vincent Laurent sat waiting, probably already writing her off as a sympathy contestant. He had no idea what was about to happen. He had no idea that the blind girl he had dismissed so casually was about to play a piece that would shake the very foundation of his beliefs. Maya reached the stage entrance and took a deep breath. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her mind was clear. The anger had transformed into something else. Something powerful. She was ready. The stage lights were bright. Maya couldn't see them, but she could feel their warmth on her face as she walked carefully toward the piano. A kind stagehand guided her gently, describing each step. 3 more steps forward. Good. Now the piano is directly to your right. The bench is about 2 feet away. Maya reached out and felt the smooth surface of the grand piano. It was much larger than her old upright at home. The wood was polished and perfect under her fingertips. This was a real concert piano, the kind she had only dreamed about playing. She found the bench and sat down, adjusting her position. The audience had gone completely quiet. Maya could feel hundreds of eyes watching her, wondering what the blind girl would do. Somewhere in that crowd, Vincent Laurent sat with his arms probably crossed, already convinced this would be a waste of his time. Maya's hands hovered over the keys for just a moment. She thought about his words again. They'll never reach true mastery. The memory sent a fresh wave of determination through her body. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the concert hall. Deep, powerful chords that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the piano itself. Maya didn't just press the keys. She poured everything she had into them. All the hours of practice in her tiny apartment. All the times people had told her she couldn't do something because of her blindness. All the loneliness of being different. All the joy of discovering that music made her feel whole. Everything went into those notes. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with absolute confidence. She didn't need to see the keys. She knew exactly where each one was, could feel the slight differences in texture, could sense the distance between notes like she was reading a map written in her bones. The technical passages that made most pianists nervous flowed from her hands like water. Her left hand provided the deep, rolling foundation while her right hand danced through the melody. The rhythm was perfect, but it wasn't mechanical. It was alive, breathing, changing with each moment. In the audience, people stopped fidgeting. Programs that had been rustling went still. Even the other competitors who had been lost in their own nervous thoughts found themselves completely captured by what they were hearing. Maya moved into the second section, where the piece becomes softer, more delicate. This was the part that always made her mother cry when she practiced at home. It was tender and vulnerable, like a whispered confession. Her fingers barely touched the keys now, drawing out notes so gentle they seemed to float in the air. She could feel the emotion of the music in her chest, could feel it spreading out into the huge hall. Without the distraction of seeing the audience or reading sheet music, Maya was completely inside the music. She and the piano and the composer's intentions had become one single thing. The piece built slowly, carefully toward its powerful climax. Maya's hands moved faster, stronger. The soft confession became a declaration. The gentle whispers became a shout. Her whole body swayed with the music. Not because she was performing or trying to look artistic, but because the emotion was too big to contain. In the judges' section, Vincent Laurent sat frozen in his chair. His expression had changed from boredom to confusion to something that looked almost like shock. The other judges glanced at him, noticing his reaction, but quickly turned their attention back to the stage. None of them wanted to miss a single moment of this performance. Maya reached the final section of the piece. This was the hardest part, where the left and right hands had to work in perfect coordination while playing completely different rhythms. It was like trying to pat your head and rub your stomach, except 1,000 times more complex. Many professional pianists struggled with this section, but Maya's hands moved independently, each one knowing exactly what it needed to do. Years of practice without being able to watch her fingers had taught her a kind of muscle memory that went deeper than visual learning. Her hands didn't need her eyes to tell them what to do. They simply knew. The music swelled to its final crescendo. Maya's fingers flew across the keys, drawing out every ounce of emotion the piece had to offer. The final chords rang out, powerful and clear and absolutely certain. Then silence. Maya lifted her hands from the keys and sat perfectly still. For a moment she wondered if something had gone wrong. Had she made a mistake? Had she gotten too emotional and messed up the technique? Then the applause started. It wasn't polite applause. It wasn't the kind of encouraging clapping you give to someone who tried their best. This was explosive, genuine, moved applause. People weren't just clapping, they were standing up. Maya could hear chairs scraping against the floor as the audience rose to their feet. Someone shouted, "Brava!" Several people were crying. Maya could hear the emotion in the applause itself, could sense that something special had just happened. Her mother was sobbing in the audience. Mrs. Roberts had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Even some of the other competitors were standing and clapping, despite the fact that Maya had just raised the bar impossibly high for everyone who had to perform after her. Maya stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaky. The stagehand appeared at her side again, ready to guide her off stage. But before she could take a step, the applause grew even louder. The audience wasn't ready to let her go. She gave a small bow, her face flushed with emotion and disbelief. As she was guided off the stage, she could still hear the applause following her. Backstage, her mother grabbed her in a tight hug. "Baby, that was incredible. I've never heard you play like that. It was perfect." It was more than perfect. Mrs. Roberts was laughing and crying at the same time. "Maya, do you understand what just happened out there? That wasn't just good. That was exceptional. That was the kind of performance people talk about for years." Maya felt dizzy, overwhelmed. "Really? I didn't make any mistakes?" "Mistakes?" Mrs. Roberts shook her head. "There weren't any mistakes. But more than that, you made that piece your own. You didn't just play Rachmaninoff. You understood him. You felt what he was trying to say, and you made us all feel it too." Other competitors were coming up to Maya, introducing themselves, congratulating her. Some seemed genuine. Others sounded nervous, worried about having to follow that performance. But Maya barely heard any of it. She kept thinking about Vincent Laurent. She wondered what he was thinking now. She wondered if he had heard what she heard, felt what she felt. She wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had proven him wrong. In the judging area, Vincent Laurent sat in complete silence. His fellow judges were talking excitedly, already comparing this performance to legendary ones they had witnessed over their careers. But Vincent couldn't speak. For the first time in his 30 years as a professional pianist and judge, he had been completely wrong about someone. Not just a little wrong, fundamentally, deeply, shamefully wrong. That blind girl hadn't just played the piano well. She had connected with the music on a level he had been chasing his entire career and never quite reached. She had done something he thought was impossible. And the worst part, the part that made him feel sick to his stomach, was that he had dismissed her before she had played a single note. He had looked at her blindness and decided she couldn't possibly be a real artist. What else had he been wrong about? How many other talented people had he dismissed over the years because they didn't fit his narrow definition of what a pianist should be? Vincent Laurent realized something in that moment. The blind one wasn't Maya, it was him. The judges' deliberation room was thick with tension. 5 judges sat around a long wooden table, score sheets spread out in front of them. Usually these discussions were straightforward, maybe a bit of friendly debate about technical merit versus emotional interpretation. But today was different. Vincent Laurent hadn't said a word since Maya's performance ended over an hour ago. He sat at the end of the table staring at his blank score sheet. The other judges kept glancing at him, waiting for him to speak. After all, he was Vincent Laurent. His opinion carried enormous weight in the classical music world. "Well," said Judge Patricia Morrison, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "I think we can all agree that was an extraordinary performance. The technical execution was flawless and the emotional depth was remarkable." "Remarkable?" Judge David Park laughed. "That's an understatement. I've been judging piano competitions for 15 years, and I've never heard anything quite like that. The way she interpreted the Rachmaninoff piece, it was like hearing it for the first time." The third judge, an older gentleman named Robert Hayes, nodded enthusiastically. Her understanding of the dynamics was sophisticated beyond her years. And that final section, the coordination required there, most professional pianists struggle with that passage. "So we're all in agreement then?" Patricia looked around the table. "She moves to the finals?" "Absolutely," David said immediately. "Without question," Robert added. All eyes turned to Vincent. He was the head judge. His vote mattered most. "Vincent," Patricia said gently, "what are your thoughts?" Vincent finally looked up. His face was pale, and there was something in his eyes that the other judges had never seen before. Uncertainty. Maybe even shame. "I need to tell you all something," he said quietly. "Before Maya performed, I said some things. Terrible things. About her specifically. About blind musicians in general. I was overheard saying that she couldn't possibly achieve true mastery. That disability limits capability. That this was just some inspirational story." The room went silent. Patricia's expression hardened. David looked shocked. "You said that?" Robert asked, his voice tight with disapproval. Vincent nodded slowly. "I did, and I was completely, utterly wrong. Not just about Maya, but about everything I thought I knew about music and artistry." He stood up from his chair and walked to the window, looking out at the concert hall below. People were milling about during the break, excited conversations about what they had just witnessed. I've spent 30 years in this profession, Vincent continued. I've performed on the greatest stages in the world. I've won awards, received standing ovations, been praised by critics. And somewhere along the way I became arrogant. I started believing that there was only one right way to approach music. My way. Patricia listened carefully, her anger softening slightly into curiosity. That girl. Vincent turned back to face them. She showed me something I had forgotten. Music isn't about reading notes on a page perfectly. It's not about stage presence or visual connection with the audience. It's about truth. It's about touching something deep inside yourself and having the courage to share it with others. She did do that, David said quietly. You could feel it in the room. Everyone was completely transported. Vincent walked back to the table but didn't sit down. Her blindness isn't a limitation. It freed her from all the superficial things that trap the rest of us. She couldn't see the audience judging her, couldn't see the competition, couldn't even see her own hands. All she had was the music itself. And she understood it better than I ever have. Robert leaned back in his chair, studying Vincent with new eyes. That's quite an admission coming from you. I know, and I need to do more than just admit it here in this room. I need to apologize to her directly. Vincent finally sat back down. But first, let's finish what we're here to do. She deserves to move to the finals. Not because we feel sorry for her, not because of some diversity quota, but because she gave the best performance of the day, by far. All 5 judges marked their score sheets. It was unanimous. Maya would advance to the finals, but Vincent wasn't finished. I'd like to request something unusual. I want to meet with her and her family, privately. I need to apologize for what I said. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You don't have to do that. She probably didn't even hear you, but she might have. And even if she didn't, I need to do this, for myself as much as for her. An hour later, Maya sat in a small conference room with her mother and Mrs. Roberts. They had been told that one of the judges wanted to speak with them. Maya assumed it was just standard procedure, maybe some feedback on her performance. Then Vincent Laurent walked into the room. Mrs. Roberts recognized him immediately and stiffened. Mr. Laurent, please call me Vincent. He pulled out a chair but hesitated before sitting down. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know this is unusual. Maya's mother sensed the tension in Mrs. Roberts's voice. Is something wrong? Is there a problem with Maya's performance? No, quite the opposite. Vincent sat down, his hands clasped together on the table. Maya, your performance today was one of the finest I've witnessed in my entire career. You will be advancing to the finals, along with 4 other competitors. You earned that spot completely. Maya felt a surge of relief and joy. Thank you. That means a lot coming from someone like you. Vincent winced slightly at her words. I'm not sure I deserve your respect. That's actually why I asked to meet with you. I need to apologize for something. Maya tilted her head, confused. Apologize for what? Before you performed, I was speaking with the other judges. I made some very ignorant, very hurtful comments about blind musicians, about you specifically, though I didn't know your name at the time. I said that disability limits capability, that blind pianists could never achieve true mastery. He paused, his voice thick with regret. I was completely wrong, and I'm deeply sorry. The room fell silent. Maya's hands gripped the edge of her chair. So she had heard right. That had been him. Her mother looked ready to unleash her anger, but Maya spoke first, her voice quiet but steady. I did hear you. I was sitting backstage when you said those things. Vincent closed his eyes, pained. I'm so sorry. There's no excuse for what I said. You almost made me quit, Maya said simply. I almost walked out and went home. I thought maybe you were right, that I was just fooling myself. Maya, no. But then I got angry. Maya's voice grew stronger. I got angry because I've heard that kind of thing my whole life. People telling me what I can't do because I'm blind. And I decided I was tired of letting other people's doubts become my limitations. Vincent nodded slowly. You turned my ignorance into fuel for one of the most incredible performances I've ever witnessed. But you shouldn't have had to do that. You shouldn't have had to prove anything because of my prejudice. Mrs. Roberts, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Why are you really here, Mr. Laurent? Is this apology just to make yourself feel better? Vincent looked at her directly. Partly, yes. I feel terrible about what I said, and I needed Maya to know that. But it's more than that. I've been teaching and judging for decades, and I've been teaching wrong. I've been so focused on technique and tradition that I've forgotten what makes music actually matter. Maya reminded me of something essential, and I need to learn from that. He turned back to Maya. If you'll allow it, I'd like to mentor you, not because I think you need fixing or because you need me, but because I think we could learn from each other. You have something to teach me about genuine artistry. Maya sat quietly, processing this. The man who had insulted her just hours ago was now asking to be her teacher. Her mother put a protective hand on Maya's shoulder. That's a big decision. We'll need to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need, Vincent stood up. Regardless of what you decide, I want you to know something. You changed my mind today. You changed my heart, and I suspect I'm not the only one. What you did on that stage will ripple out in ways you can't imagine yet. As Vincent left the room, Maya sat in silence. Mrs. Roberts squeezed her hand. What are you thinking, sweetheart? Maya smiled slightly. I'm thinking that sometimes the people who are hardest on us are the ones who need to learn the most. And maybe that's worth something. 3 days after their meeting, Maya made her decision. She called Vincent and agreed to let him mentor her. Not because she needed validation from a famous pianist, but because she saw something genuine in his apology. She believed people could change, could grow from their mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, she could help change how the classical music world viewed disabled musicians. The finals took place 2 weeks later. Maya performed again, this time choosing a piece by Chopin that was equally challenging but more intimate. Once again, she brought the audience to tears. When the winners were announced, Maya took first place. The standing ovation lasted so long that the organizers had to gently encourage people to sit down so the ceremony could continue. But winning the competition was just the beginning of Maya's story. Vincent kept his word. Over the next few months, he worked with Maya on advanced techniques and introduced her to other professional musicians. But their sessions were different from typical teacher-student relationships. Yes, Vincent taught her about the technical aspects of performance he had mastered over decades. But Maya taught him something just as valuable about listening with more than just your ears, about feeling music in your whole body, about letting go of perfection in favor of truth. Vincent also did something else. He started speaking publicly about his experience with Maya, about his own prejudice and what he had learned from being so completely wrong. He wrote articles for music journals. He gave interviews. He spoke at conservatories and music schools around the country. I spent 30 years thinking I understood music, he would tell audiences, but I was so trapped by tradition and technique that I had lost touch with what makes music actually matter. A 17-year-old blind girl taught me more in 10 minutes than I had learned in my entire career. She taught me that limitations can sometimes be our greatest teachers, forcing us to find different paths to the same destination, and sometimes those different paths lead somewhere even more beautiful. His words carried weight. Vincent Laurent was respected, even feared in the classical music world. When he admitted he had been wrong, people listened. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. Conservatories started actively recruiting disabled musicians instead of quietly discouraging them. Performance venues improved their accessibility. Competition organizers created guidelines to ensure fair treatment for musicians with disabilities. It wasn't a complete transformation overnight, but it was a start. Maya received a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious music conservatories in the country, the same institution that just 5 years earlier had rejected a blind applicant because they didn't have the resources to accommodate her. Her mother cried when the acceptance letter arrived. After all those years of working 2 jobs, all those sacrifices, her daughter was getting opportunities that once seemed impossible. At the conservatory, Maya thrived. Some professors didn't quite know how to teach a blind student at first, but they learned. Maya was patient with them, understanding that change takes time. She also found other students with disabilities, musicians who played despite or perhaps because of their unique challenges. They formed a tight community, supporting each other through the difficulties of intense musical training. But Maya never forgot where she came from. Every few months, she would return to her old neighborhood and give free piano lessons to kids who couldn't afford expensive teachers. She especially sought out students with disabilities, kids who had been told they couldn't learn music. "My teacher never gave up on me," she would tell them, "so I'm not giving up on you." 3 years after winning the National Youth Piano Competition, Maya was invited to perform as a soloist with the National Symphony Orchestra. It was the kind of opportunity that most pianists spent their entire careers hoping for. She would be playing at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., one of the most prestigious venues in the world. The night of the performance, Maya stood backstage in her concert dress, her mother beside her. Mrs. Roberts had flown in for the occasion, and Vincent was there too, no longer just her mentor but her friend. Nervous? Vincent asked. Maya laughed. Terrified. Just like the first time. Good, that means you still care. The day you stop being nervous is the day you stop growing. Thank you, Maya said suddenly. For everything. For apologizing. For teaching me. For using your platform to help other musicians like me. Vincent shook his head. I should be thanking you. You gave me my love of music back. You reminded me why I started playing piano in the first place, before the competitions and the fame and the ego took over. Maya's mother hugged her tight. I'm so proud of you, baby. Your father would have been too. The stage manager called for Maya. It was time. As she walked onto the stage, guided by her now familiar stagehand, the audience erupted in applause before she had even played a note. Word had spread about the blind pianist who had won the national competition. People had come specifically to hear her play, but Maya knew this performance wasn't about proving herself anymore. She had already done that. This was about sharing something beautiful with people who needed it. In a world that often felt harsh and divided, music could still bring people together, still make them feel connected to something larger than themselves. She sat at the piano, took a breath, and began to play. The piece she had chosen was Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5, known as the Emperor Concerto. It was bold, triumphant, and joyful. As her fingers moved across the keys as the orchestra swelled around her, Maya felt completely at peace. This was where she belonged. Not because she had overcome her blindness, not because she was inspiring, but because she was a musician, pure and simple, someone who understood that music wasn't about seeing notes on a page. It was about feeling them in your soul. When the final notes faded and the audience stood in ovation, Maya felt tears on her cheeks. Happy tears. Grateful tears. In the audience, her mother wept openly. Mrs. Roberts beamed with pride. And Vincent Laurent, the famous pianist who once believed blind musicians could never achieve true mastery, stood and applauded until his hands hurt. After the performance, as Maya met with admirers and reporters backstage, a young girl approached shyly. Her mother gently guided her forward. Excuse me, the mother said. My daughter wanted to meet you. She's blind too, and she just started learning piano. You're her hero. Maya knelt down to the girl's level. What's your name, sweetheart? Lily, the girl said softly. I'm 8. My teacher says I'm too young to know if I'm really good at piano yet, but I love it. I want to be like you someday. Maya felt her heart swell. This right here was why everything had been worth it. The doubt, the fear, the cruel words, the struggles. If her journey could make it easier for kids like Lily, then every difficult moment had meaning. Listen to me, Lily. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. Not because you're too young, not because you're blind, not for any reason. If you love music, then music is already yours. You don't have to be like me. You just have to be yourself, and that will be more than enough. The little girl hugged Maya tight, and Maya hugged her back, remembering herself at that age, wondering if she would ever be good enough, if her blindness would always hold her back. Years later, when people asked Maya about her success, about becoming one of the most celebrated pianists of her generation, she always told the same story. Not about the competition she won or the famous venues where she performed. She told them about Vincent Laurent, about a man who had the courage to admit he was wrong and then used his influence to create change. He didn't have to apologize, Maya would say. He could have just moved forward and pretended it never happened. But he chose to be honest about his mistakes, and that honesty changed everything. Not just for me, but for countless other musicians who had been dismissed because of their disabilities. Vincent, for his part, always insisted that Maya had taught him far more than he had taught her. In his later years, he became one of the most vocal advocates for accessibility in classical music. He used his reputation to open doors that had been closed for too long. The story of Maya and Vincent became well known in the music world, not as a fairy tale about overcoming obstacles, but as a real example of how prejudice works and how it can be unlearned. It showed that even experts can be blind to their own biases, and that sometimes the people we dismiss have the most to teach us. Maya's career flourished over the years. She recorded albums, toured internationally, and taught at major conservatories. But she never forgot her roots. Never forgot the scared 17-year-old girl who almost walked away from her dreams because of one man's cruel words. And she never forgot that sometimes, the people who hurt us can become our greatest allies if we give them the chance to grow. Because that's what Maya understood better than most. Music wasn't just about the notes you played. It was about the connections you made, the lives you touched, and the courage to keep playing your own song even when the world told you to be quiet.